My friends, listen to me very carefully today. Leadership does not begin the day you receive a title. It does not begin the day you are promoted. Leadership does not begin the day people start following you. Leadership begins the moment you decide to master yourself. That is where true leadership is born. That is where it is tested, and that is where it is proven. You were not created by God to be ruled by your emotions. You were created to rule beginning with yourself. The Bible says, a man without self-control is like a city broken down without walls. That means if you cannot control your emotions, you have no protection, you have no defense, you have no leadership. Because leadership is not first about managing people, leadership is first about managing you. You see, most people want to influence the world, but they cannot influence their own reactions. They want to change nations, but they cannot change their anger. They want to discipline others, but they refuse to discipline themselves. They want respect, but they cannot restrain their impulses. And so they live as prisoners, not because someone locked them up, but because their emotions govern them. Hear me, you can never rise above the level of your emotional maturity. Your potential can take you to the top. Your gift can open a door, but only emotional control will keep you there. Talent may attract attention, but emotional discipline earns trust. And trust is the currency of leadership. I have traveled the world, spoken with presidents, CEOs, prime ministers, pastors, educators, entrepreneurs, and I discovered something. The difference between failure and success, between influence and insignificance, is not education. It is not intelligence. It is not charisma. It is emotional governance. The ones who cannot govern their emotions eventually mismanage their opportunities. They sabotage their relationships. They destroy their credibility. They collapse under pressure. Not because they lack skill, but because they lacked mastery of self. That is why I want you to write this down in your heart. Leadership is the manifestation of controlled emotions under the authority of purpose. When purpose is not ruling you, emotion will. And when emotion rules you, you become unstable, unpredictable, and unsafe to lead. People do not follow unstable individuals. People do not trust emotional volcanoes. People do not submit to leaders who explode when pressured, collapse when criticized, or react when offended. People follow those who remain steady, anchored, calm, and clear, even when storms are raging around them, because those people have mastered the storm within. This is why emotional control is not optional. If you desire to lead, it is foundational. It is the bedrock upon which every other leadership attribute is built. Character grows on it. Integrity stands on it. Wisdom flows from it. Influence is sustained by it. Without it, leadership becomes a performance, not a conviction. And performances always fail under real pressure. Listen, leadership is not proven in comfort. Leadership is proven in crisis. And crisis does not create leadership, it reveals it. When pressure comes, your degree won't save you. Your talent won't protect you. Your gift won't guard you. Only your emotional discipline, your ability to remain governed, steady, and purposeful will determine whether you rise or fall. This is why, before God gives you authority over others, He demands authority over yourself. Before He lets you shepherd people, He watches how you shepherd your emotions. Before He trusts you with nations, He tests you with reactions. Before He places you on platforms, He examines your private responses. If your emotions are still the loudest voice in your life, you are not ready to lead anyone. Write this truth on your mind. If you cannot manage your emotions, you will mismanage your assignment. Your emotions were never meant to be dictators. They were designed to be indicators. They tell you how you feel. They were never meant to tell you what to do. When emotions give instructions, destiny is always damaged. But when purpose gives instructions, emotions come under control. That is the difference between unstable people and leaders. So today, we begin this journey together, a journey into what I call the leadership anointing of emotional control. Because emotional control is not natural. It is not automatic. It is not inherited. It is cultivated. It is disciplined. It is trained. And for the kingdom citizen, it is empowered by the Spirit of God Himself. By the end of this teaching, You will understand why some people lead with calm authority while others crumble under pressure. You will understand why some individuals carry influence that cannot be shaken. You will understand why nations fall when leaders lose emotional restraint, and why families rise when fathers and mothers gain emotional mastery. You will understand that emotional control is not weakness, it is authority. It is not silence, it is strategy. It is not suppression, it is stewardship. It is not passivity, it is leadership. So I want you to listen carefully, lean in, take notes, and open your spirit, because the next few moments may define the next season of your life. Leadership does not begin outside of you, it begins within you. And today we begin with the foundation, emotional control as the bedrock of true, God-given, kingdom-centered leadership. Now hear me carefully. The greatest leadership challenge you will ever face in your life is not the management of people, it is the management of yourself. Before God ever allows a man to govern a nation, He tests whether that man can govern his own spirit. Before He trusts you with a ministry, He examines your personal discipline. Before He gives you followers, He inspects your inner world. Because leadership is not first the governance of others, it is the governance of you. This is what I call the law of inner government. And this law is the foundation of all leadership. When you violate this law, every other leadership gift collapses under its weight. But when you obey this law, you become a safe, stable, trustworthy vessel that heaven and earth can rely on. Listen, inner government means ruling your emotions, thoughts, impulses, appetites, desires, and reactions under the authority of your purpose. Inner government is the invisible throne from which true leadership flows. Everybody wants to sit on an external throne, but very few have established an internal throne. And the kingdom you fail to rule within will sabotage the kingdom you attempt to rule without. You cannot manage a company if you cannot manage anger. You cannot manage a team if you cannot manage jealousy. You cannot manage responsibilities if you cannot manage your moods. You cannot manage people's trust if you cannot manage your own thoughts. I want you to hear this. The most dangerous leader is an emotionally ungoverned leader, because their instability becomes a public disaster. This is why God's first test for every leader is not ability, but stability. When Joseph was in prison, God wasn't testing his administrative skills. He was testing his emotional discipline. Could he forgive? Could he restrain himself? Could he stay faithful? Could he hold his peace? Could he remain calm when falsely accused? Those tests determined whether he would one day sit on the throne of Egypt. Not intellect, not talent, not charisma, emotional governance. Every leader must learn this truth. You cannot defeat what you refuse to discipline. If you refuse to discipline your emotions will discipline your destiny. Inner government means you no longer allow your emotions to have automatic permission to act. You install a government, a spiritual government, a mental government inside yourself. And in that government, purpose is the president, wisdom is the advisor, and emotion is a servant, not a king. But for most people, emotion is king. Emotion dictates decisions. Emotion dictates relationships. Emotion dictates responses. And the result is a life without order, without structure, without progress. A life held hostage by feelings. But leadership requires the opposite. Leadership requires order. Leadership requires structure. Leadership requires principles. And those things cannot exist until you establish them inside yourself first. The book of Proverbs says, "He who rules his spirit is greater than he who captures a city." Do you understand what that means? It means self-government is greater than public victory. Because if you conquer the world but never conquered yourself, your world will eventually collapse on top of you. History is filled with brilliant men who destroyed themselves not because of their enemies, but because of their emotions. History is filled with gifted leaders who lost empires not because they lacked strategy, but because they lacked self-control. History is filled with talented individuals who fell not from weakness, but from emotional impulsiveness. My friend, hear me. A man who cannot lead himself is unqualified to lead anyone else. Inner government means you become intentional about your internal environment. You regulate your thoughts. You discipline your feelings. You interrogate your impulses. You question your motives. You silence your ego. You challenge your fears. You restrain your anger. You align your emotions with your assignment. And you refuse to let temporary feelings make permanent decisions. Let me give you a leadership truth that can transform your life. Your emotions are passengers, but your purpose must be the driver. When inner government is weak, emotions grab the wheel and they will always drive you into a ditch. When inner government is strong, purpose holds the wheel and emotions take their proper seat in the back. And here is something many people do not understand. Emotional government is not suppression, it is supervision. It is not silence, it is stewardship. It is not denial, it is discernment. A controlled emotion is not a buried emotion. It is an educated emotion, instructed by purpose and trained by wisdom. When you master inner government, stress no longer intimidates you. Offense no longer distracts you. Criticism no longer destabilizes you. Pressure no longer manipulates you. Conflict no longer provokes you. And fear no longer paralyzes you. You become a leader people trust, not because you are perfect, but because you are predictable. Your team can count on you. Your family can depend on you. Your community can follow you. Because you don't change with your feelings bend to your character. I want you to understand this. Inner government is the birthplace of emotional intelligence, spiritual maturity, and leadership credibility. Without it, you are simply a talented emotional reactor. With it, you become a stable, trustworthy kingdom leader. And this is why emotional control is not optional. It is the first law of leadership. Because when you govern yourself, you are prepared to govern responsibilities, influence, resources, people, and assignments without collapsing under the weight. So today, I want you to make a decision. A decision to install a government inside yourself. A decision to enthrone purpose over emotion. A decision to let wisdom override impulse. A decision to rule the inner world God has given you stewardship over. Because once you master yourself, and only then are you ready to master leadership. Now, let us go deeper into the foundation of emotional leadership. After inner government, the next law that determines the stability and maturity of a leader is what I call the law of response over reaction. This law is so important that if you violate it, you will destroy opportunities you prayed for, relationships you needed, and platforms God prepared for you. Hear me. Reacting is instinct. Responding is leadership. There is a vast difference between the two. Animals react. Children react. Immature people react. But leaders, true leaders, respond. Because reacting is emotional impulse. Responding is emotional intelligence. Reacting is temporary feeling. Responding is permanent principle. Reacting is the fruit of your emotions. Responding is the fruit of your purpose. And the tragedy is this. Most people live their entire lives reacting, not responding. They react to what people say. They react to criticism. They react to pressure. They react to betrayal. They react to offense. They react to inconvenience. They react to fear. And the problem with reacting is that reaction is always immediate, emotional, and expensive. Write this down. Your greatest regrets in life came from reactions, not responses. I guarantee you, every painful mistake you made, every unnecessary conflict you entered, every opportunity you lost, every relationship you damaged, all of them came from a moment when you reacted instead of responding. Because reaction is impulsive. Reaction is flesh-driven. Reaction is unfiltered. Reaction is undisciplined. Reaction is emotional immaturity on display. And the enemy knows this. He doesn't need to destroy you. He only needs to provoke you. Because a provoked leader is a defeated leader. A provoked leader hands over the keys of their authority to the one who provoked them. That is why Jesus never reacted. The Pharisees accused him, but he did not react. The crowd misunderstood him, but he did not react. His disciples abandoned him, but he did not react. Pilate questioned him, but he did not react. Satan tempted him, but he did not react. He always responded calmly, strategically, purposefully, because reaction is from pressure, but response is from purpose. Let me give you a leadership principle that can save your life. The more authority you carry, the slower you must respond. Leaders cannot afford to be reactive. Parents cannot afford to be reactive. Pastors cannot afford to be reactive. Husbands and wives cannot afford to be reactive. Business owners cannot afford to be reactive. When you react, you lose control. When you react, you lose clarity. When you react, you lose influence. When you react, you lose leadership credibility. People follow leaders who are calm under fire, not emotional under pressure. Hear me. The person who can push your emotional buttons controls your life. If someone can make you angry at will, they own you. If someone can provoke you anytime they want, you are their puppet. You are not leading, you are being led by their manipulation. Leadership requires something much higher. The discipline of the pause, the deliberate moment between stimulus and choice, between emotion and decision, between feeling and action. That pause is where wisdom speaks. That pause is where your purpose reintroduces itself. That pause is where the Spirit of God whispers clarity. That pause is where emotional reaction is transformed into leadership response. If you learn to pause, you will prevent 90% of the destruction your emotions could cause. If you learn to pause, you will save relationships before they rupture. If you learn to pause, you will protect opportunities before they slip away. If you learn to pause, you will stop the enemy from using your emotions as a weapon against your own destiny. Now listen, responding is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is not silence, it is strength. It is not delay, it is direction. Leaders don't rush into emotional expression, they select emotional precision. A reaction says, I am controlled by the moment. A response says, I am controlled by my mission. A reaction says, this is how I feel. A response says, this is who I am. A reaction says, I will do what my emotions dictate. A response says, I will do what my purpose demands. And that, my friend, is leadership. The greatest leaders in history were not the most emotional, they were the most emotionally governed. They spoke less but said more. They waited longer but acted wiser. They refused to be pulled into emotional storms created by others. They mastered the art of responding calmly, intentionally, intelligently, even when provoked. Let me tell you something important. Reaction is free. Response is expensive. Reaction costs you nothing in the moment, but everything in the future. Response costs you everything in the moment, but builds everything in the future. This is why leadership is not defined by how you act when things go well, but how you respond when things go wrong. Leadership is proven under pressure. Response is proven under fire. And emotional mastery is proven under provocation. So from this day, make a decision. I refuse to react. From now on, I respond. I refuse to be ruled by the moment. I will be ruled by my mission. I refuse to let emotions speak first. Purpose will speak first. I refuse to give people control of my reactions. I am responsible for my responses. I refuse to allow storms around me to create storms within me. Because leadership begins the moment you decide to respond from purpose instead of reacting from emotion. Now let us go even deeper. Because once you understand the law of inner government, and once you embrace the law of response over reaction, you must then rise into what I call the law of perspective. And this law, my friend, separates common people from leaders. It separates the emotional from the wise. It separates the anxious from the anchored. It separates those who live in reaction from those who live in revelation. Perspective is not what you see. Perspective is the position from which you see. And leaders see life from a higher position. Write this down. Your emotional stability is directly connected to your spiritual altitude. If you live in the valley, everything looks overwhelming. If you live on the mountain, everything looks manageable. The valley magnifies problems. The mountain reveals solutions. The valley exaggerates emotions. The mountain aligns emotions. The valley feeds panic. The mountain produces clarity. This is why leaders must not think from the ground. Leaders must see from the mountain. Leaders must rise above the moment, above the pressure, above the offense, above the crisis, above the confusion, and look from the elevation of purpose. Hear me. Emotion sees the moment. Leadership sees the mission. Emotion sees the attack. Leadership sees the assignment. Emotion sees the inconvenience. Leadership sees the investment. Emotion sees the obstacle. Leadership sees the opportunity. Emotion sees the storm. Leadership sees the season. Perspective determines emotional control. You are not emotional because your situation is big. You are emotional because your perspective is small. You are not overwhelmed because the problem is impossible. You are overwhelmed because you are evaluating it from the wrong altitude. A bird cannot fly if it sees like a worm. A leader cannot lead if they see like a follower. Perspective transforms the same situation into a different experience. Two people can face the same crisis. One panics, the other plans. One reacts, the other responds. One collapses, the other adjusts. One is ruled by emotion, the other is ruled by vision. The difference is not the crisis, the difference is perspective. Let me tell you something vital. When you change how you see, you change how you feel. And when you change how you feel, you change how you behave. And when you change how you behave, you change the outcome. Everything begins with perspective. This is why God constantly elevates the perspective of his leaders before he elevates their influence. He took Abraham outside and said, "Look at the stars." He took Moses up the mountain and showed him the land. He took Elijah to the quiet place and whispered purpose. He took John to the heavens and revealed revelation. God always raises sight before he raises assignment. Because leaders do not lead with emotions, they lead with vision. And vision requires perspective. This is why emotional people struggle to lead. They only see the immediate, not the eventual. They only see the discomfort, not the development. They only see the conflict, not the construction. They only see the pain, not the purpose. But leaders understand something deeper. What you see determines what you feel. And what you feel determines what you choose. And what you choose determines what you become. So if you want emotional authority, you must elevate your perspective. You must train your mind to see beyond the offense, to see beyond the insult, to see beyond the pressure, to see beyond the crisis, to see beyond the temporary storm, to see beyond the immediate inconvenience. Let me give you a powerful leadership truth. Emotion makes decisions based on today. Leadership makes decisions based on tomorrow. Emotion says, this hurts. Leadership says, this prepares me. Emotion says, I'm frustrated. Leadership says, I'm being formed. Emotion says, this is the end. Leadership says, this is instruction. Emotion says, why is this happening to me? Leadership says, what is this teaching me? And hear this clearly. Perspective is the difference between emotional collapse and emotional control. When you see from the mountain, fear loses power. When you see from the mountain, conflict loses control. When you see from the mountain, offense loses influence. When you see from the mountain, pressure loses its threat. When you see from the mountain, emotions submit to wisdom. This is why leaders rise before they react. They rise above the moment. They elevate their thinking. They step into the future mentally before they act physically. They look at difficulty through the lens of destiny. Perspective gives meaning to your emotions. Without perspective, emotions mislead you. With perspective, emotions assist you. Hear this. Perspective is emotional intelligence in prophetic form. It allows you to see from the viewpoint of purpose. It allows you to interpret life from the vantage point of vision. It allows you to respond from wisdom instead of reacting from weakness. This is why before you speak, rise. Before you decide, rise. Before you respond, rise. Before you confront, rise. Rise above your feelings. Rise above your fears. Rise above your frustration. Rise above the moment. And speak from the mountain, not from the valley. Because when a leader sees correctly, they feel correctly. And when a leader feels correctly, they lead correctly. Perspective is the leadership filter that produces emotional clarity. It is the mountain from which true leaders see the world. Now, we come to one of the most difficult, demanding, but absolutely essential laws of emotional leadership, the law of self-discipline. If you hear nothing else I teach today, hear this. You cannot lead anything until you can lead yourself. Leadership is not first about managing people, it is about mastering yourself. Because your greatest battlefield is not the economy, not the culture, not your enemies, not your critics. It is you. You are your own most dangerous adversary. You are your own greatest threat. And you are your own greatest potential. This is why the most powerful leaders in history were not praised for their charisma, but for their discipline. Emotional control is impossible without discipline. Vision is impossible without discipline. Purpose is impossible without discipline. Destiny is impossible without discipline. Write this down. Discipline is the decision to constrain yourself for the sake of your calling. You cannot do what everyone else is doing. You cannot speak the way everyone else speaks. You cannot react the way others react. You cannot behave the way others behave. Why? Because your future is too important, your assignment is too valuable, your influence is too significant, and your destiny is too costly. Leadership demands restriction. Greatness requires limitation. Success requires structure. Purpose requires self-control. People who refuse to discipline themselves end up being disciplined by life, by consequences, by regret, and by wasted years. But people who discipline themselves become unstoppable. Let me give you a revelation. The undisciplined life is an emotionally unstable life. If you do not control your habits will control your emotions. If you do not control your appetites will control your decisions. If you do not control your impulses will control your destiny. Discipline is the fence that protects emotional mastery. Hear this. Discipline is not denial, it is direction. Discipline is not restriction, it is refinement. Discipline is not punishment, it is preparation. Discipline is not limitation, it is liberation. Because discipline frees you from the slavery of your emotions. Most people are not controlled by demons, they're controlled by desires. Not by enemies, but by impulses. Not by curses, but by habits. Not by circumstances, but by their inability to govern themselves. And this is why God cannot trust some people with influence. Influence without discipline becomes destruction. If God gave some people promotion, they would sabotage it within weeks. If God gave them platforms, their emotions would ruin their credibility. If God gave them financial increase, their lack of discipline would bury them in mismanagement. If God gave them relationships, their unchecked reactions would destroy the very people meant to help them. Leadership requires discipline. Discipline in speech, because words have consequences. Discipline in time, because your purpose is time sensitive. Discipline in habits, because repetition forms character. Discipline in emotions, because feelings cannot drive destiny. Discipline in relationships, because wrong company corrupts emotional stability. Discipline in thought, because thoughts become beliefs, and beliefs shape behavior. Discipline in reactions, because every response reveals your maturity. Let me give you a powerful truth. Discipline is the price of authority. You cannot carry authority over others if you have no authority over yourself. You cannot command environments if you cannot command your own emotions. You cannot govern responsibility if you cannot govern your own impulses. Self-discipline is not optional, it is foundational. And hear this clearly. Your emotional outbursts are not personality, they are a lack of discipline. Your uncontrolled anger is not passion, it is immaturity. Your impulsive decisions are not spontaneity, they are disorder. Your inability to wait is not urgency, it is lack of restraint. Discipline is the hallmark of kingship. Discipline is the test of leadership. Discipline is the mark of maturity. A disciplined person wakes up before emotions decide. A disciplined person speaks only after wisdom approves. A disciplined person responds only after purpose interprets. A disciplined person acts only after principles confirm. Leaders do not follow feelings, they follow standards. This is why Scripture teaches, better is he who rules his spirit than he who conquers a city. Because conquering a city requires force, But conquering yourself requires discipline. Now listen to me carefully. The more disciplined your life becomes, the less emotional chaos you experience. When you discipline your schedule, time stops stressing you. When you discipline your thoughts, anxiety stops ruling you. When you discipline your reactions, conflict stops draining you. When you discipline your environment, temptation stops distracting you. When you discipline your priorities, regret stops haunting you. Discipline creates peace. Discipline creates stability. Discipline creates clarity. Discipline creates emotional strength. People think emotional control is a feeling. No, it is a discipline. It is the daily choosing of purpose over impulse, vision over reaction, destiny over mood. Every great man and woman you admire is not great because of talent, but because of discipline. Talent is a gift. Discipline is a choice. Talent opens the door. Discipline keeps the door open. Talent brings attention. Discipline brings elevation. Talent makes you impressive. Discipline makes you impactful. Let me summarize the law for you. Self-discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you are destined to become. Without it, you remain trapped in potential. With it, you rise into purpose. You discipline yourself because your calling is too important to allow your emotions to drive you. You discipline yourself because your future requires a stronger version of you. You discipline yourself because greatness demands sacrifice. You discipline yourself because leadership requires maturity. You discipline yourself because purpose requires consistency. Discipline is the key that locks the door on emotional instability. Discipline is the weapon that defeats internal chaos. Discipline is the foundation upon which emotional authority is built. And until you embrace the law of self-discipline, you will always be a prisoner of your feelings instead of a leader of your destiny. Every leader God ever raised was tested not by enemies, not by circumstances, not by critics, but by their own emotions. Because before God gives you leadership over people, He must test your leadership over yourself. Before He trusts you with the destiny of others, He must examine the condition of your heart. Before He promotes you to influence nations, He must stabilize you against the storms within. Leaders are not tested by comfort. Leaders are tested by conflict. Leaders are not measured in calm. Leaders are measured in crisis. Leaders are not revealed in peace. Leaders are revealed in pressure. And the greatest pressures you will ever face are not external, they are emotional. There are 3 emotional tests every true leader must pass. If you fail these tests, you will sabotage your destiny. But if you master them, you become unstoppable. Let us walk through them. Emotional test has shown. The test of offense. Everyone who rises will be offended. Everyone who leads will be misunderstood. Everyone who elevates will be criticized. The question is not whether offense will come. The question is how you handle it. Offense is one of the enemy's most destructive weapons, because offense does not attack your body, it attacks your heart. And the heart is the seat of leadership. Write this down. Offense reveals whether you are led by emotion or led by purpose. People who live offended never fulfill their assignment. Offense distorts your perspective, contaminates your motives, sabotages your relationships, and destroys your focus. Hear me. The offended heart is the distracted heart. You cannot lead effectively when your heart is wounded. You cannot think clearly when your emotions are inflamed. You cannot hear God's voice when you are replaying what someone did to you. Leaders must not be easily offended because purpose is too great to be crippled by petty emotions. A leader must rise above offense, not because the offense wasn't painful, but because the mission is more important than the emotion. The first emotional test is simple. Do you protect your heart more than your feelings? If you can move beyond offense, you are ready for the next test. Emotional test #2, the test of delay. Delay is the school in which emotional maturity is forged. Delay teaches patience. Delay exposes motive. Delay reveals discipline. Delay tests emotional stability. Most people fail the test of delay because they confuse delay with denial. But delay is not denial. Delay is development. God uses delay to strengthen your character. God uses delay to refine your priorities. God uses delay to separate emotion from purpose. And here is the truth. If you cannot wait, you cannot lead. Leadership requires long-term thinking, long-term vision, long-term endurance. But emotional people want everything now. They want instant results, instant validation, instant success, instant gratification. However, hear this carefully. Mature leaders understand that every great destiny requires the patience to wait for God's timing. What do you do when it seems like nothing is working? What do you do when doors take longer to open? What do you do when progress moves slower than your desire? Your emotional responses in seasons of delay reveal whether you are ready for the next level. Delay exposes impulsiveness. Delay strengthens endurance. Delay humbles pride. Delay produces wisdom. If you can remain stable in delay, if you can remain focused without seeing results, if you can remain purpose-driven while waiting, then you are ready for the next test. Emotional test #3, the test of provocation. This is the most dangerous test of all, because provocation is the enemy's attempt to pull you out of character. It is the moment when someone deliberately tries to push you beyond your limits. It is when situations deliberately demand a reaction from you. If offense hurts the heart, if delay stretches the heart, provocation exposes the heart. And hear me, any area where you are easily provoked is an area where you are not yet a leader. A leader who can be provoked at will is a leader with no control. A leader who can be pulled into emotional chaos is a leader not yet entrusted with long-term influence. A leader who loses their composure loses their credibility. Provocation is the test that asks, can you stay calm when others are losing control? Can you stay wise when others are irrational? Can you stay grounded when emotions erupt around you? This is Jesus standing silent before his accusers. This is Moses learning not to strike the rock in anger. This is David refusing to kill Saul even when provoked. This is Nehemiah ignoring the mockery of his enemies. This is Daniel unmoved by political manipulation. Provocation is not about the situation, it is about your stability. It is not about the pressure, it is about your posture. It is not about the insult, it is about your identity. A leader who is not easily provoked becomes a dangerous force because people cannot manipulate them. Circumstances cannot control them. Enemies cannot intimidate them. Emotion cannot move them. And here is the truth of leadership. Your authority grows every time you refuse to be provoked. The enemy wants you emotional because emotional people are predictable. But when you pass the test of provocation, you enter a realm of spiritual and emotional authority where you cannot be manipulated by people, pressured by circumstances, or destabilized by conflict. Summary of the 3 tests. Offense tests your heart. Delay tests your patience. Provocation tests your stability. If you master your emotions in these 3 areas, you become a leader ready for influence, ready for responsibility, and ready for destiny. Because God promotes not the gifted, not the talented, not the charismatic, but the emotionally stable. These 3 tests determine whether you can carry greatness without being destroyed by greatness, whether you can lead people without being manipulated by people, whether you can rise to purpose without falling to emotion. A leader who passes these tests becomes truly unshakable. Now we come to one of the most powerful emotional principles in leadership, the law of detachment. This law is misunderstood by many because it sounds cold, uncaring, or distant, but it is none of those things. It is not the detachment of the heart, it is the detachment of identity. It is not detachment from people, it is detachment from dependence. It is not detachment from love, it is detachment from emotional captivity. Write this down. Detachment is the ability to stay internally independent even when you are externally connected. You can love people without depending on their approval. You can work with people without being controlled by their emotions. You can care deeply without being emotionally enslaved. You can lead people without being drained by people. Because let me tell you the truth, You cannot lead people you are emotionally addicted to. And you cannot stay stable around people you give emotional permission to control you. Detachment is emotional sovereignty, the refusal to hand over your internal government to people, circumstances, or outcomes. Hear me carefully. Emotional dependence is the enemy of leadership. If people can validate you, they can manipulate you. If people can offend you, they can redirect you. If people can intimidate you, they can silence you. If people can flatter you, they can influence you. If people can anger you, they can govern you. This is why leaders must cultivate detachment, not to distance themselves from relationships, but to protect themselves from emotional bondage. Detachment is not distance, it is discipline. A detached leader listens without absorbing negativity, loves without losing identity, cares without compromising clarity, connects without collapsing under pressure, helps without becoming hostage to expectations. Most people become emotionally exhausted, not because they love too much, but because they attach too tightly. They take responsibility for everyone else's feelings. They absorb everyone else's conflicts. They internalize everyone else's reactions. They personalize everyone else's behavior until they are emotionally depleted. Detachment breaks that bondage. Detachment begins with identity. You cannot detach from people until you attach to purpose. You cannot detach from emotion until you attach to vision. You cannot detach from pressure until you attach to principle. A leader who knows who they are cannot be emotionally hijacked. A leader who knows their assignment cannot be emotionally distracted. A leader who knows their value cannot be emotionally manipulated. Identity is the anchor of detachment. Jesus demonstrated this perfectly. He loved people deeply, but was never controlled by people. He healed multitudes, but was not moved by applause. He rebuked Pharisees, but was not destabilized by criticism. He served his disciples, but was not dependent on their loyalty. Even when they abandoned him, he stayed aligned to purpose. Even when Judas betrayed him, he remained emotionally steady. Even when Peter denied him, he did not collapse internally. Why? Because his emotional foundation was identity, not dependency. Detachment protects you from emotional manipulation. Let me explain something important. Wherever there is emotional attachment without emotional discipline, there will be emotional control. People may not intend to manipulate you, but uncontrolled attachment gives away your power. If someone's opinion can devastate you, you are attached. If someone's silence can unsettle you, you are attached. If someone's mood can shake you, you are attached. If someone's approval determines your confidence, you are attached. If someone's rejection defines your value, you are attached. A leader must remain emotionally independent from the behavior of others. Not disconnected, independent. Not withdrawn, grounded. Not cold-centered. Not distant, disciplined. Detachment simply means this. You govern how you feel, not them. Detachment creates emotional clarity. When you are overly attached to approval, you fear correction. When you are overly attached to outcomes, you fear risk. When you are overly attached to relationships, you fear boundaries. When you are overly attached to success, you fear failure. But when detachment enters your spirit, clarity enters your decisions. Detachment allows you to say no without guilt, walk away without fear, confront without trembling, lead without needing applause, correct without losing compassion, serve without becoming a slave, help without becoming hostage to expectations, love people without losing yourself in people. Detachment gives you the emotional freedom to lead from principle instead of pressure. Detachment strengthens emotional resilience. When you detach emotionally, you stop overreacting. You stop overthinking. You stop overfeeling. You stop carrying burdens that do not belong to you. Because the emotionally attached person absorbs everything. But the emotionally detached leader evaluates everything. Let me give you a leadership key. Detachment helps you interpret situations, not internalize them. You don't take things personally. You don't react impulsively. You don't misread conflict. You don't magnify offense. You don't collapse under pressure. Instead, you remain steady, unmoved, balanced, clear, wise. Detachment is a difference between reacting emotionally and responding purposefully. Detachment is required for destiny. God will not elevate you until you detach from emotional dependencies that could destroy your assignment. Many people are stuck not because they lack potential, but because they are too attached to the wrong relationships, the wrong validation, the wrong environment, the wrong opinions, the wrong expectations. Your destiny requires separation from emotional captivity. You cannot carry your future if your emotions are still entangled with your past. You cannot enter purpose if you are still attached to the approval of people you've outgrown. You cannot lead on mountains if you are emotionally tied to the valleys God delivered you from. Purpose demands detachment. Leadership demands detachment. Emotional mastery demands detachment, because detachment is the foundation of inner freedom. You are not fully free until people lose the power to control your emotional climate. That is emotional leadership. That is maturity. That is independence. That is kingdom self-government. Now we come to a law so powerful that if you understand it, you will never again see your emotions as weaknesses. You will see them as energy, as resources, as raw material for greatness. I call it the law of emotional transmutation, the ability to convert emotions into fuel for purpose. Hear me carefully. Your emotions were never meant to control you. They were designed to empower you. Anger, fear, disappointment, frustration, passion, grief. None of these emotions were given to sabotage your destiny. They were given as energy, as signals, as indicators of potential power inside you. The problem is not emotion, the problem is misdirection. Emotion is like fire. If unmanaged, it burns the house down. If harnessed, it warms, cooks, and creates. Emotion can destroy your destiny or drive your destiny. And the difference is leadership. Write this down. Transmutation means converting emotional energy into productive power. Leaders do not suppress emotion, they transform emotion. They don't suffocate how they feel, they redirect how they feel. They don't deny emotions, they deploy emotions. Because emotion is not your enemy. Emotion is your energy. Emotion is your fuel. Emotion is your internal momentum. Let me show you how this works. 1. Transmuting anger into focus. Anger is one of the most misunderstood emotions. Most people express it destructively, impulsively, verbally, or aggressively. But anger is simply the emotional signal that something is misaligned. Anger says, this needs attention, this needs correction, this needs discipline, this needs boundaries, this needs leadership. What immature people do with anger is explode. What mature people do with anger is examine. But what leaders do with anger is convert it into focus. Anger is an indication of passion. Passion is an indication of purpose. Purpose is an indication of assignment. So instead of letting anger disrupt your life, leaders allow anger to clarify their priorities, to sharpen their decisions, to fuel their discipline, to increase their intentionality. Write this down. Anger, when transmuted, becomes clarity. 2. Transmuting fear into strategy. Fear is not always the sign of danger. Sometimes it is the sign of importance. Fear shows up because your future is bigger than your comfort zone. Fear appears because you are stepping into territory your emotions have not yet adapted to. Immature people let fear paralyze them. Emotional people let fear confuse them. But leaders let fear prepare them. Fear can be transmuted into strategy. Fear says, this matters too much for sloppy preparation. Fear says, look closely, pay attention, think carefully. Fear says, this requires wisdom, planning, and diligence. Fear can make you sharper. Fear can make you wiser. Fear can make you more calculated. Fear can make you more spiritually attentive. Write this down. Fear, when transmuted, becomes strategy. 3. Transmuting pain into wisdom. Pain is the greatest educator in human history. There is no classroom more effective than experience. No textbook more honest than disappointment. No teacher more thorough than adversity. Pain introduces you to yourself. Pain reveals your blind spots. Pain exposes your attachments. Pain reveals your emotional triggers. Pain forces you to grow. Immature people resist pain. Emotional people absorb pain. But leaders study pain. Pain becomes information. Pain becomes instruction. Pain becomes insight. Pain becomes intelligence. Write this down. Pain, when transmuted, becomes wisdom. 4. Transmuting frustration into innovation. Frustration is the emotional sign that your current strategy has reached its limit. It is not a sign to quit, it is a sign to pivot. Frustration is the birthplace of creativity. When you say, there must be a better way, leadership answers, yes, now find it. Frustration pushes you out of stagnation. Frustration forces you to restructure, rethink, and reinvent. Frustration births solutions. Immature people collapse under frustration. Emotional people complain in frustration, but leaders innovate through frustration. Write this down. Frustration, when transmuted, becomes innovation. 5. Transmuting passion into discipline. Passion by itself is unstable. Passion without discipline becomes emotional chaos. Passion without structure becomes wasted energy. But passion with discipline becomes unstoppable power. Passion fuels movement. Discipline directs movement. Purpose completes movement. This is why passion is dangerous without a plan, but explosive with a system. Leadership takes passion and turns it into patterns. It takes emotion and turns it into execution. It takes inspiration and turns it into implementation. Write this down. Passion, when transmuted, becomes discipline. 6. Transmuting desire into destiny. Desire is the emotional seed of your potential. What you desire reveals who you can become. But desire is useless without direction. Many people desire success, few discipline that desire into action. Many desire peace, few discipline that desire into emotional control. Many desire greatness, few discipline that desire into habits. Leaders take desire and form destiny with it. Desire shows the path. Discipline walks the path. Destiny rewards the path. Write this down. Desire, when transmuted, becomes destiny. Transmutation principle. Emotion is energy never wasted. Every feeling you have is energy. Do not waste emotional energy on reaction. Do not waste emotional energy on worry. Do not waste emotional energy on anger for anger's sake. Do not waste emotional energy on complaining, comparing, or fearing. Convert it, redirect it, transmute it, use it. Turn emotion into power. Turn emotion into purpose. Turn emotion into better habits. Turn emotion into better decisions. Turn emotion into deeper leadership. This is emotional mastery. This is the discipline of kings. This is the intelligence of leaders. This is the secret behind those who rise while others collapse. The greatest leaders in history were not emotionless, they were emotionally intentional. They felt everything but reacted to nothing. They used emotion but were not used by emotion. They converted feeling into fuel. That is the law of emotional transmutation. Now that we have understood the laws, the principles, and the internal architecture of emotional mastery, we must come to something very practical, what I call the leader's emotional arsenal. These are the tools, the disciplines, the protocols a leader must practice daily in order to maintain emotional strength, stability, clarity, and authority. Because listen to me, emotional mastery is not an event, it is a lifestyle. You don't become emotionally strong because you listen to one message. You don't become emotionally disciplined because you had one revelation. You don't become emotionally stable because you read one book. Emotional control is the result of daily maintenance, daily practices, daily decisions, and daily alignment. You cannot master your emotions occasionally. You must master them consistently. These protocols are not optional. They are essential. They are the habits that build the emotional immune system of a leader. Let us walk through them. 1. Daily protocol of stillness. The first weapon in your emotional arsenal is stillness. You cannot rule your emotions if your spirit is always noisy. An unsettled heart produces an unsettled life. Every leader needs a moment each day when the world stops and the spirit listens. Stillness is where clarity is born. Stillness is where anxiety is corrected. Stillness is where identity is reinforced. Stillness is where purpose speaks. Stillness is where emotions bow to wisdom. If you neglect stillness, you will be led by impulse. If you embrace stillness, you will be led by insight. 2. Daily protocol of emotional awareness. Emotional maturity begins with emotional awareness. If you cannot identify what you feel, you cannot control what you feel. Awareness asks, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? What triggered it? Is this emotion valid, exaggerated, or misplaced? What principle should govern my response? Leaders do not let emotions run wild in the shadows. They interrogate emotions. They study emotions. They interpret emotions. Because every emotion is a message, and every message requires a wise interpreter. Write this down. Emotion unexamined becomes emotion unrestrained. 3. Daily protocol of pre-decisions. Leaders do not wait for emotions to rise before deciding how to behave. They make pre-decisions. A pre-decision is a covenant with your future self. It is the decision you make today that will protect you tomorrow. You decide before the emotion appears. I will not argue emotionally. I will not respond while angry. I will not react to provocation. I will pause before speaking. I will stay calm regardless of pressure. I will protect my peace at all costs. I will not surrender my leadership to feelings. If you do not make pre-decisions, emotions will make decisions for you. Emotional control is not spontaneous. It is premeditated. 4. Daily protocol of boundaries. You cannot control your emotions if you allow everything and everyone access to your emotional space. Boundaries are walls that protect your peace, your time, your purpose, and your stability. A leader must learn to say, no, I am not available. No, this is not my assignment. No, I will not enter this conflict. No, I cannot take responsibility for how you feel. No, I refuse to participate in chaos. Boundaries are not unloving. Boundaries are wisdom. Most emotional exhaustion comes from poor boundaries. Most emotional instability comes from unfiltered access. Boundaries protect your leadership. 5. Daily protocol of purpose alignment. Emotion becomes confused when purpose becomes unclear. Every morning a leader must align themselves with purpose. Purpose filters emotions. Purpose interprets events. Purpose stabilizes reactions. A leader should ask daily, what is my assignment? What is my priority? What matters most today? What must I ignore? What deserves my emotional investment? Purpose is the compass of emotional intelligence. Without purpose, emotions wander. With purpose, emotions obey. 6. Daily protocol of silence before response. Silence is not withdrawal. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategic. Silence is intelligent. Silence is strength. There is power in learning to say nothing until wisdom forms the right words. The emotionally immature speak quickly. The emotionally mature speak carefully. The emotionally wise speak intentionally. Silence is the pause where leadership begins. Write this down. Silence protects you from emotional sabotage. 7. Daily protocol of gratitude recalibration. Gratitude is not an emotion, it is a discipline. And gratitude is the great regulator of emotional storms. Why? Because gratitude shifts your focus from what is missing to what is present. From what hurts to what heals. From what frustrates to what develops. From what was lost to what was gained. Emotional instability thrives in environments of forgetfulness. But gratitude anchors the heart in truth. A grateful leader is a stable leader. A grateful leader is a balanced leader. A grateful leader is a powerful leader. Gratitude recalibrates your emotional climate. 8. Daily protocol of environmental curation. Your environment shapes your emotions more than you realize. If you surround yourself with negativity, you will absorb instability. If you surround yourself with chaos, you will absorb tension. If you surround yourself with complainers, you will absorb discouragement. If you surround yourself with immature people, you will absorb emotional confusion. A leader must curate their environment like a gardener manages soil. Who you listen to, what you watch, what you read, where you go, who you spend time with. All of these are emotional fertilizers. Surround yourself with people who carry peace, not panic. Who carry wisdom, not drama. Who carry purpose, not distraction. Your environment either strengthens your emotional discipline or weakens it. 9. Daily protocol of reflection and review. At the end of each day, a leader must reflect. Reflection is where emotional growth happens. Reflection is where improvement happens. Reflection is where correction happens. A leader asks, where did I lose control today? What triggered me and why? What did I learn about myself? Where must I improve tomorrow? How can I respond better next time? Reflection turns mistakes into mastery. Reflection turns experience into elevation. Reflection turns failure into formation. Without reflection, you repeat patterns. With reflection, you rewrite patterns. 10. Daily protocol of spiritual reconnection. Finally, and most importantly, a leader must reconnect spiritually every day. Because emotional control without spiritual grounding is temporary. It becomes self-help, not transformation. It becomes behavior modification, not character formation. The presence of God stabilizes the soul. The Word of God reprograms the mind. The Spirit of God governs the emotions. The peace of God guards the heart. A leader anchored in God becomes emotionally unshakable. A leader who walks with God becomes internally immovable. A leader who surrenders to God becomes spiritually unprovocable. Spiritual connection is not optional for emotional mastery. It is the source. Because true emotional authority flows from divine authority. This arsenal makes you unstoppable. When you practice these protocols daily, you build an emotional system that cannot be manipulated, cannot be provoked, cannot be intimidated, cannot be destabilized, cannot be enslaved by feelings, cannot be hijacked by circumstances, cannot be shattered by people. This is the arsenal of a leader. This is the lifestyle of emotional mastery. This is the discipline of kings. This is the architecture of inner government. This is the foundation of unstoppable leadership. My friend, after everything we have explored together, the laws, the tests, the disciplines, the protocols, there is one final truth I want to leave with you. It is the truth that separates leaders from followers, builders from breakers, pioneers from prisoners, and rulers from reactors. Leadership is emotional warfare. And those who win are those who rule themselves. The greatest battle of your life will never be against people. It will never be against circumstances. It will never be against critics or enemies. It will never be against systems or structures. Your greatest battle is inside you, the battle for emotional authority. Until you conquer that war, you cannot conquer any territory outside yourself. But once you master that war, there is no territory outside yourself that can resist you. Hear me. You cannot be a prisoner of your emotions and a leader of your destiny at the same time. You must choose one. You cannot follow your feelings and fulfill your purpose. You cannot react impulsively and rise in authority. You cannot be controlled by circumstances and still influence them. You cannot be provoked by people and still lead them. Leadership begins where emotional dependence ends. Leadership begins where inner government begins. Leadership begins where self-discipline begins. Leadership begins where emotional transmutation begins. And leadership becomes unstoppable when emotional identity becomes unshakable. You were not born to be controlled by emotion. You were born to govern it. God did not design you to be ruled by reactions. God did not design you to be enslaved to impulses. God did not design you to be defeated by offense. God did not design you to be weakened by fear. God did not design you to be manipulated by people. God did not design you to be tossed around by feelings. He created you to carry dominion, and dominion begins with self. Everything God gives you is supposed to be ruled by you. Your time, your decisions, your attitude, your speech, your thoughts, your choices, your reactions, your emotions. This is the true meaning of leadership, self-government. Before Adam lost control of the garden, he lost control of himself. Before Moses lost the promised land, he lost control of his anger. Before Samson lost his strength, he lost control of his desire. Before Saul lost his kingdom, he lost control of his jealousy. Before Judas lost his ministry, he lost control of his greed. The fall of great men is always emotional before it is external. Do not become the next example in that list. Become the exception. Leadership is not about what you acquire, it's about what you become. What you acquire may impress people, but who you become determines your destiny. People don't follow titles, they follow temperament. People don't trust charisma, they trust consistency. People don't admire talent, they admire self-mastery. You cannot guide others where you have not gone. You cannot calm others while you are internally chaotic. You cannot inspire others if you are emotionally unstable. You cannot influence others if your reactions betray your intentions. True leadership is a manifestation of emotional maturity, emotional clarity, emotional intelligence, and emotional authority. This is why the greatest leaders in history were not the strongest physically, they were the strongest emotionally. Their power came from their stability. Their influence came from their identity. Their authority came from their composure. Their wisdom came from their inner government. They were unshakable internally, so nothing outside could shake them. You are becoming that leader right now. By embracing these laws, by passing these tests, by living these protocols, by mastering your inner world, you are stepping into a new level of leadership, a level most people never reach. You are becoming emotionally unshakable, calm under pressure, clear under provocation, stable under conflict, wise under stress, purposeful under attack, centered under temptation, composed under chaos. You are becoming a leader whose emotions serve your destiny, not sabotage it. A leader whose reactions are governed by vision, not by feelings. A leader whose heart is anchored in identity, not insecurity. A leader whose mind is aligned with purpose, not panic. A leader whose decisions come from wisdom, not impulse. This is the kind of leader the world is starving for. This is the kind of leader your family needs. This is the kind of leader your generation deserves. This is the kind of leader God intended you to be. The emotionally unshakable leader leaves a legacy that cannot be erased. Such a leader does not merely succeed. They transform, they uplift, they strengthen, they build, they inspire, they empower, they change the atmosphere wherever they go. An emotionally unshakable leader becomes a refuge in crisis, a pillar in uncertainty, a compass in confusion, and a stabilizing force in turbulent times. That is who you are becoming. That is who you must be. That is who you were born to be. Your assignment begins now, not tomorrow, not next month, not after you feel ready, not after life gets easier. Emotional mastery begins the moment you decide to rule your inner world. Make the decision today. Make the commitment today. Make the covenant today. Say within yourself, I will no longer be ruled by feelings. I will no longer be manipulated by emotions. I will no longer surrender my peace to people. I will no longer allow offense to shape my future. I will no longer let fear guide my decisions. I will rise in emotional authority. I will lead myself. I will govern myself. I will master myself. I will become the leader I was born to be. If you make that decision today, your life will begin to rise slowly, consistently, unavoidably, into the greatness God placed within you. Because emotional mastery is not the end of leadership. It is the beginning. The world is waiting for you. Your generation is waiting for you. Your assignment is waiting for you. Your destiny is waiting for you. Rise and become the emotionally unshakable leader you were designed to be.